Hi, welcome to a session on ELK Stack. Before we start discussing about the ELK Stack, let me brief you about some concepts on continuous monitoring, what is requirement, and what other monitoring tools are available in the market. Then we'll come to the ELK Stack, why we need it, and what's its advantages over the other monitoring tools. Then we'll discuss in detail about the ELK stack and its application. Now, let's start with the continuous monitoring. The first question arises, what is continuous monitoring? Hope you have all familiar with the concepts of CI/CD, that is continuous integration and continuous delivery. We will not discuss in detail about the concepts of CI and CD because I assume you are already familiar with these terminologies and this is outside the scope of our session to cover. So we'll start with continuous monitoring. Just like the CI/CD concepts in DevOps, we are having another terminology that is known as continuous monitoring. Continuous monitoring is an automated way where your entire IT infrastructure, starting from your application to business processes to your servers, can be monitored in a continuous manner. It helps to resolve any sort of errors before having any negative impact on the business services. It can be low memory, unreachable servers, or network issues, etc. So, in a nutshell, we can say that there are three major applications of continuous monitoring. The first one is troubleshooting the issues in CI/CD pipeline, that is continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. The second one, check your infrastructure or the server's health. And the last one, take care of performance issues in the system. So these are the three major applications of continuous monitoring. Now, the next question arises, when do we need the continuous monitoring and who actually needs it? The answer is, in almost all phases of software development life cycle, we need continuous monitoring. And if we talk about the phases of the software development, that is from the requirement analysis to the designing to development to testing and to deployment, we'll see that continuous monitoring is required. And when we start with the requirement phase, we plan our continuous monitoring tools, what tools we need to use. That means in the requirement analysis phase, we plan about the continuous monitoring. In the designing phase, we prepare the design, how we should implement the continuous monitoring in our system. During the development, testing, and deployment phase, we actually implement the continuous monitoring tools and the reporting structure. Now, once we know that when exactly it is needed, now the question arises, who actually needs it? So if you look at the category of the stakeholders, starting from the project manager or the product manager, developers, testers, operation team members, help desk, all business stakeholders. security team members, or the customers and end users. That means everybody who's involved in the software development or who's a stakeholder in that particular system needs the monitoring in their project. If we look at the perspective from the product manager, they are more concerned about the quality of the product. They need to monitor the quality of the product being developed. The developers are more concerned about troubleshooting the issues as and when they develop their software. Testers require the performance and regression testing as per their requirement. Similarly, the operation teams are concerned with the support activities and the infrastructure. The security team is more concerned about the intrusion and the enforcement of the policies. Compliance team looks for the auditing and SLA management kind of monitoring. The customers and the end users are concerned with the real-time billing, the matrix and the account information. That means each and every stakeholder and the member who is involved in this software development is concerned with the monitoring requirement. So once we know that who actually needs the monitoring, the next question arises, what actually needs to be monitored? This is a very important question from the monitoring perspective. What kind of information or the data that needs to be monitored? If you look at the categories on the screen, you can see that they are broadly categorized into the following areas where we can say that monitoring is required. If we talk about the performance, then monitoring is required. The performance of the network speed, the performance of the page loads, the performance of the response times, etc. Next comes the capacity. If you're talking about the capacity of the system, what is the disk usage status? What is the CPU utilization? What is the bandwidth of the network? Uptime, the availability of the servers, since how long the servers are running, throughput, the number of transactions per second, like web pages, cache, databases, networks, etc. SLAs, service level agreements, the availability, the security, and the reliability of the system. The governance issues, like the access rights, permissions, intrusion, cost management. From the user metrics perspective, how many registrations are required, click rates, page view rate, etc. That means if we look at these categories, we can say that it's required in almost every kind of category that monitoring is required. Now, once we know that these are the fields where we need to monitor our system, we broadly categorize the monitoring into the following types. So basically we divide the monitoring into the four categories. First one is the real-time monitoring. The second one is application performance monitoring. The third one is infrastructure monitoring. And the last one is log monitoring. Starting with the first kind of monitoring, that is real-time monitoring. As the name suggests, this kind of monitoring is used when we are dealing with the real-time data. The real-time and continuous monitoring of the business processes, the data analytics. Let's take an example of a soccer match. a live match which is going on. If we wanted to know the statistics, that how many spectators are available in the stadium, how many people watching the match online through the internet websites or the web apps, etc. That means we are dealing with the real-time data and statistics. Similarly, the real-time reservation systems like aviation system, where we need to know the status of the flights, the seats available, number of flights from a given source and the destination, current status of the flight, etc., etc., are the examples of real-time monitoring system. So here we can say that when the data is generated at the real time, we will be using real-time monitoring, and the tool that is commonly used for this kind of monitoring is Splunk. The next category of the monitoring is the application performance monitoring. As the name suggests, where we need to monitor the performance of the running applications, we use this kind of monitoring tools. The tools which falls under the category of this kind of monitoring are App Dynamics, Scouts, and these tools are the commercialized tools, and you have to buy the license for these kind of tools. The third one is the infrastructure monitoring, where we are dealing with the infrastructure of the servers like CPU, memory, network, disk space, etc., etc. So where the infrastructure is involved to be monitored, we use infrastructure monitoring activities. The tools that are used under this category are SolarWinds, Nagios, and Zabbix, where SolarWinds is a licensed tool and Nagios and Zabbix fall under the category of open source tools. The fourth one is log monitoring, where we need to monitor the logging details of the system. We use the tools which are helpful to find out the log details. The tools used under this category are Sumo Logic, Splunk, and ELK Stack, where Sumo Logic and Splunk are the licensed one, whereas the ELK Stack, which we will be discussing in detail the rest of our course, is an open source tool. With that, we complete our type of monitoring. Now, if we look at the current scenario of the market, approximately 92% of IT organizations and the enterprise companies are currently using at least one or more of the monitoring tools in their organization. Whereas 55% of the organizations need some kind of solutions that they need to implement in their organization. So 92% of the companies which are already having some kind of monitoring tools, but they are not using one of the competent tools available in the market, but they are using some or any of the monitoring tools. But 55% of the companies need to implement some unified solutions which are helpful to generate the reports on time, which are helpful to generate the analytics reports for the data. So you can say that what is the current market trend? Currently, each and every organization is looking for some or any of the monitoring tool available in their company to monitor the data. Now, if we look at The logging or the monitoring tool solutions which are available in the market, they are broadly categorized into the two categories: open source and commercial. Under the open source category, we have Logstash, Greylog, Logzilla. These are the mainly used tools which are under the open source category. And on the other hand, if you're talking about the commercial tools which are licensed one, the tools which are commonly used in the market are Splunk, Logly, Sumologic, and Log entries. So these are the commonly used tools which fall into the category of commercialized tools. And Splunk is the topmost tool that is being a top leader in the market from the commercial logging solutions category. Now, as we know that the available tools in the market, then why we need ELK Stack? What are the advantages of using the ELK Stack over the other available monitoring tools in the market? The first most category that why ELK Stack is being chosen is that it is open source. It's a free of cost without any licensed requirement. We can utilize and implement this tool in our organization. There's a huge community support is available and the documentation is there on the internet in case you need any kind of support. A large set of APIs, application programming interface, and the extensibility, that is a huge plus point why we need to use ELK Stack, because a huge number of APIs and further extensibility of these APIs helps us to implement these tools in our organization. Distributed search and analytics. A bigger advantage of ELK Stack that it supports data analytics and that can be used any kind of analytical activities like generating analytical reports in graphical format. It also supports the databases which are NoSQL like Hadoop. It can be integrated with certain other tools and it supports plugins for that integration. A variety of other reasons that why ELK Stack should be used, that we can use a different kind of logging mechanisms. If we want that the system which is dealing with a large number of user base, for example, in an academic institution where we have large number of students, teachers and admin staffs, where we need to generate the report, then ELK Stack is helpful. Where we have a lot of systems like routers, firewalls, networks, servers, and if you are dealing with a lot of logs like system logs, access logs, service logs, audit logs, and any other kind of web logic logs. So these kind of categories are being easily supported by ELK Stack. And last but not the least, it's proactive in nature. That means before the system gets down, it proactively sends you the respond about the status of the system. We usually use the logging mechanism when something went wrong, and many of the tools work in that reactive way. But the ELK Stack, instead of being reactive, it is proactive in nature, and it helps you to get your system working before it's shut down due to any issues or any errors because of the infrastructure reasons. And if you look at the customers which are supported by the ELK Stack, The major customers included are LinkedIn, Fujitsu, Accenture, Netflix, OpenStack, etc. So these are the major customers which ELK Stack is supporting currently, despite of having the open source kind of tool where they doesn't need any kind of license to be purchased. Still, it is supporting these huge organizations without any issues. So that is the power of the ELK stack, and the major and the giants companies currently are using services of the ELK stack. Now, before we go inside the details of the ELK stack, we want you to know that why the ELK stack should be used. Before the ELK stack, what are the old and the traditional ways to monitor the systems or to use the logging mechanism? If you go back to the history of the monitoring tools, where there were no unified solutions available in the market, we will be using the monitoring activities in bits and pieces. For example, if we take the example of Unix or the Linux platform, the tools which were being used for monitoring activities were like top command, vmstat, syslogs, grep commands, perl, sed, awk, etc. etc. So these are some of the commands which helps us to provide the monitoring details or the logging activities of the system. But that was into bits and pieces, and there was no user-friendly way to generate the reports for these activities. That means it was very cumbersome to generate the logging reports during the traditional days. To overcome the problems of these monitoring activities, ELK stack comes into the picture around the beginning of the 2000, where this ELK stack, which is a combination of three different set of tools, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, that three tools connecting together will make one tool that is known as ELK stack, and that is also known as, or you can say rebranded as Elastic Stack. So we'll be discussing these tools one by one in detail, and how these three tools collectively work together to fulfill the requirement of monitoring tools. We'll be looking into the due course. This is the architecture diagram of ELK stack. If you look at the left hand side, these are the documents that are the input to the first tool, that is the Logstash. That means Logstash is a tool which fetch the logging details from the documents. It can be in any format. It can be in text format, it can be in picture formats, or it can be in any kind of graphical format. It fetch the data from the documents, collect it and transform into the format which is being recognized by Elasticsearch. That means output of the Logstash is the input to the next tool, that is Elasticsearch. The Elasticsearch is a kind of search engine which search, index, and analyze the logs taken from the Logstash, process it, and send it to the next tool, that is Kibana. Kibana, which is a UI tool, or you can say is a visualize tool, which take the inputs from the Elasticsearch, process it, and produce it in the graphical user format, which is easily visible to the end user. So the end user is dealing with this Kibana tool, which is a visualize or a UI tool that helps to generate the logging details in a beautiful and graphical format. So the second component which we had just discussed is the Logstash. The Logstash is nothing but it is an open source tool which collects the data from the documents and process it and feeds to the Elasticsearch. This is what we have discussed in the architectural diagram. This is the first tool which take the input from the documents, process it, and feed it into the next tool, that is Elasticsearch. Next, we'll be discussing in detail the Logstash. What is Logstash? What are its components and what are its input plugins and the output plugins for the Logstash? That will be covering in the next session.